Imagine waking up on a volcanic island, 8 square miles of black sand and sulfur, surrounded by the ocean with nowhere to run. The air smells of rotten eggs. The ground is so hot in places that you can feel the heat through your boots. And somewhere ahead of you, hidden in an invisible network of tunnels and bunkers, thousands of enemy soldiers are waiting, ready to die rather than surrender. This is Iwo Jima, February 1945. Welcome to one of the most brutal, most costly, and most iconic battles in the entire history of the United States Marine Corps. Over the next 36 days, nearly 70,000 American Marines would clash with 21,000 Japanese defenders on this tiny island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The result would be a battle so savage, so relentless, that Admiral Chester Nimitz himself would later say, "Uncommon valor was a common virtue." In this video, we are going to walk through the entire battle, from the strategic reasons why this island mattered so much, to the final days of fighting in the northern cliffs. We'll look at the men on both sides, the tactics, the turning points, and the human cost of those 36 days of hell. Let's go back to 1945. By late 1944, the United States was winning the war in the Pacific, but it wasn't over yet. American forces had been island hopping across the Pacific for 2 years, pushing closer and closer to the Japanese mainland. Saipan, Guam, the Philippines, one by one, the outer defenses of the Japanese Empire were falling. But there was a problem. American B-29 Super Fortress bombers were flying long missions from the Mariana Islands to bomb Tokyo and other Japanese cities. These missions were incredibly dangerous, not just because of Japanese fighter planes and anti-aircraft fire over Japan itself, but because of Iwo Jima. Iwo Jima sits almost exactly halfway between the Mariana Islands and Tokyo. The Japanese had radar stations on the island that gave Tokyo nearly 2 hours of warning before American bombers arrived. Worse, Japanese fighter planes based on Iwo Jima could intercept the bombers on their way to and from their targets. For the Americans, capturing Iwo Jima would solve 2 critical problems at once. First, it would eliminate the early warning radar and the fighter threat. Second, it would give American forces an emergency landing strip for damaged B-29s that couldn't make it all the way back to the Marianas. Hundreds of bomber crews were already dying because they had nowhere to land. The island had to be taken. The only question was, at what cost? For Japan, Iwo Jima was equally important, but for different reasons. By this point in the war, Japanese military leaders knew they could not win in the traditional sense. Their navy had been destroyed. Their air force was running out of trained pilots. The strategy had shifted, make every American advance so costly, so bloody, that the United States would eventually negotiate a peace, rather than face the nightmare of invading the Japanese home islands. Iwo Jima was to be a demonstration of that strategy. The man chosen to defend Iwo Jima was General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, and he was unlike most Japanese commanders of his era. Kuribayashi had spent time in the United States in the late 1920s, serving as a military attaché. He had traveled across the country, studied American industry, and come away deeply impressed by American military and economic power. He reportedly warned his superiors that Japan should never go to war with the United States, a view that made him unpopular in certain circles, but also gave him a realistic understanding of what his men would be facing. When Kuribayashi arrived on Iwo Jima in June 1944, he immediately understood that a conventional beach defense would be suicidal. American naval firepower was simply too overwhelming. Any soldiers positioned on the beaches would be annihilated before they could fire a shot. So Kuribayashi did something radical. He ordered his men to abandon the beaches entirely and go underground. Over the next 8 months, 21,000 Japanese soldiers dug an astonishing network of tunnels beneath the volcanic rock of Iwo Jima. By the time the Americans arrived, the island contained over 11 miles of tunnels connecting hundreds of bunkers, artillery positions, machine gun nests, and command posts. Some tunnels went 75 feet deep. Rooms were large enough to hold hundreds of men. There were hospitals, ammunition depots, and kitchens, all underground, all protected from naval bombardment by solid rock. The plan was simple but devastating. let the Americans land on the beach, let them advance inland, and then open fire from hidden positions on all sides. Every gun emplacement was designed to cover multiple fields of fire. Every position was connected to the tunnel network so that defenders could retreat, reposition, and reappear somewhere else. Kuribayashi had one explicit order for his men: no banzai charges. The suicidal frontal assaults that had characterized so many other Pacific battles were forbidden. Every soldier was to fight from cover, conserve ammunition, and kill as many Americans as possible before dying. Each man was expected to take 10 enemy lives before his own ended. It was, by any military standard, a brilliant defensive plan. And it would cost the Marines dearly. February 19th, 1945. H-hour, 9 a.m. The naval bombardment that preceded the landing had been going on for 3 days. Hundreds of shells had pounded the island. From the ships offshore, some observers thought nothing could possibly have survived. The island looked like the surface of the moon, cratered, smoking, apparently lifeless. They were wrong. At 9 a.m., the first waves of Marines hit the beaches. Around 30,000 men would come ashore on the first day. And for the first few minutes, it was almost eerily quiet. Then Kuribayashi gave the order. From hundreds of hidden positions, Japanese artillery, mortars, machine guns, and rifles opened fire simultaneously. The beach, already difficult to cross because of the soft volcanic black sand that caused men to sink up to their ankles with every step, became a killing ground. Marines who made it ashore found themselves unable to dig foxholes because the sand simply collapsed back in. Equipment sank, vehicles got stuck, men were cut down as they struggled forward. The carnage in the first hours was horrific, but the Marines did not stop. What made the United States Marine Corps so formidable, then as now, was the combination of intensive training, unit cohesion, and a culture of aggressive forward movement, even under fire. Officers and sergeants who fell were replaced immediately by the next man in line. Small units improvised, adapted, and kept moving. By nightfall on February 19th, approximately 30,000 Marines were ashore. The cost, around 2,400 casualties in a single day. But they were on the island, and they weren't leaving. At the southern tip of Iwo Jima stands Mount Suribachi, a dormant volcano rising 546 feet above the beach. From its summit, Japanese observers could direct artillery fire onto virtually every inch of the landing beaches. Taking Suribachi was not just a military objective. It was psychologically essential. The fight for Suribachi lasted 4 days. Marines of the 28th Regiment, 5th Marine Division, fought their way up the slopes yard by yard, destroying pillbox after pillbox, crawling through razor wire, losing men at every turn. The Japanese had fortified the mountain with nearly 1,000 defenders, most of them connected to the tunnel network below. On February 23rd, just 4 days after the landing, a small patrol of Marines reached the summit. They raised a small American flag on a makeshift pole. The signal was seen from the beaches below, and a great cheer went up from thousands of men. But the moment that would define the battle, and arguably the entire war, came a few hours later. A larger flag was brought up, and a group of 6 Marines raised it on a longer pole. Associated Press photographer Joe Rosenthal captured the moment in a single photograph that would become one of the most famous images in history. The photo ran on front pages across the United States the next day. President Roosevelt had it turned into a war bond poster. It would eventually become the model for the Marine Corps War Memorial in Washington, D.C. 3 of the 6 men in that photograph did not survive Iwo Jima. The flag was up, but the battle was far from over. Suribachi had fallen, but 21,000 Japanese soldiers were still waiting in the tunnels and ridges to the north. With Suribachi secured, the Marines turned north and entered the most brutal phase of the battle. The northern part of Iwo Jima was a nightmare landscape of jagged volcanic rock, steep ridges, and hidden ravines. Every high point was fortified, every approach was covered by interlocking fields of fire, and beneath it all, Kuribayashi's tunnel network allowed the Japanese to move troops and supplies without ever exposing themselves to American firepower. 3 areas became particularly notorious: Hill 382, the Amphitheater, and Turkey Knob. Together, they earned the grim nickname, the Meat Grinder. Marines would take a position in the morning, at enormous cost, only to find that Japanese soldiers had moved through the tunnels overnight and reoccupied it. The same ground was fought over multiple times. Progress was measured in yards, casualties mounted every single day. The standard tactics of the Pacific War, naval gunfire, air support, artillery, were of limited use here. Shells that would have destroyed surface positions simply disappeared into the tunnels. Flame-throwing tanks proved more effective, as did the M2 flamethrower carried by individual Marines. But using a flamethrower meant getting close, very close, to enemy positions. It was in this phase of the battle that many of the Medal of Honor actions took place. On Iwo Jima, 27 Medals of Honor were awarded, the most for any single battle in American military history. Many were awarded posthumously. Day after day, the Marines advanced. Day after day, they paid for every yard in blood. It is important to pause here and think about the human beings on both sides of this battle, because the statistics alone cannot capture the full weight of what happened on this island. On the American side, nearly 7,000 Marines were killed in action on Iwo Jima. Over 19,000 were wounded. These numbers are almost incomprehensible when you consider that the entire island is only 8 square miles. The casualty rate for some units exceeded 50%. Some rifle companies that landed with 250 men came off the island with fewer than 50. The letters that Marines sent home during this period, when censorship allowed, speak of exhaustion so profound that men fell asleep under fire. They speak of watching friends die and having no time to grieve because the next objective was already waiting. They speak of fear, not the sharp fear of a sudden ambush, but the grinding, constant fear of a battle that seemed like it would never end. On the Japanese side, the story is even more devastating. Of the approximately 21,000 Japanese defenders, only around 216 were taken prisoner. The rest, roughly 20,700 men, died on the island. Most died exactly as Suribachi had planned, fighting from their positions until they were killed or until their ammunition ran out. Many of the Japanese soldiers on Iwo Jima were not hardened veterans. They were young men, teenagers in some cases, who had been told that surrender was dishonorable and that death in battle was the highest sacrifice they could make. The letters and diaries found on the bodies of Japanese soldiers after the battle reveal the same things as the American letters: fear, longing for home, love for family, and an awareness that death was coming. War does not belong only to generals and admirals, it belongs to the young men who do the dying. By mid-March 1945, organized Japanese resistance was collapsing. But collapsing on Iwo Jima still meant daily firefights, ambushes, and casualties. Pockets of Japanese soldiers held out in caves and tunnels throughout the northern part of the island. Rooting them out was slow, dangerous work. On March 25th, the night before the island was officially declared secure, a group of several hundred Japanese soldiers, possibly led by Suribachi himself, launched a final attack on American positions near the airfields. In the darkness, they overran a camp of Army Air Forces personnel and Seabees, construction battalions, killing 53 Americans and wounding nearly 120 more before being destroyed. The following day, March 26th, Iwo Jima was declared secure. General Suribachi was never found. His body was never positively identified. It is believed he died in the final attack or shortly after, possibly by ritual suicide, as was customary for Japanese officers facing defeat. He had sent a final message to Imperial headquarters acknowledging the end, expressing regret that he had failed in his mission, and praising the courage of his men. In Japan today, Suribachi is remembered as one of the most capable commanders of the Pacific War, a man who fought with extraordinary skill against impossible odds, and who died with his soldiers on a volcanic island far from home. So what was Iwo Jima worth? After the battle, the airfields on the island were immediately put to use. Within weeks, American fighter planes based on Iwo Jima were escorting B-29 bombers on raids over Japan. Emergency landings on the island's runways saved the lives of thousands of airmen whose damaged planes would never have made it back to the Marianas. By some estimates, over 2,400 B-29 aircraft, made emergency landings on Iwo Jima before the war ended, carrying crews that might otherwise have been lost at sea. Whether that justified the cost in marine lives is a question that historians and veterans have debated for decades. There are no easy answers. What is beyond debate is that the Marines who fought on Iwo Jima, on both sides, displayed extraordinary courage, endurance, and sacrifice in conditions that are almost impossible to imagine. For 36 days, in the most inhospitable environment imaginable, human beings pushed themselves to the absolute limit of what the human body and spirit can endure. The flag that went up over Mount Suribachi did not end the battle. It did not bring back the dead. But it became a symbol of determination, of sacrifice, and of the belief that some things are worth fighting for, even at terrible cost. Iwo Jima was declared a Japanese territory again in 1968, and today it remains a restricted military island administered by the Japan Self-Defense Forces. A small number of descendants of the island's original inhabitants, who were evacuated before the battle, have been allowed to visit. The bones of thousands of Japanese soldiers are still buried in the tunnels beneath the volcanic rock. The island is quiet now, but the ground still smells of sulfur, and the black sand still holds the memory of those 36 days of hell. Thank you for watching. If you found this video interesting, please like and subscribe for more military history content.